Test check 1 2. Test check 1 2. Welcome all, this is Jim D&D, and welcome to Disabled ODM. Forgive me for having a smoke oak, but I'm trying to save time. Unfortunately, the Google Hangout I did with the review of the Copper Jackal supplement had a technical issue in which audio was not picking up, so I'm gonna have to reshoot a video of my review. Unfortunately, that means we won't have the guests who were in the Hangout out giving their opinions, which I really enjoyed hearing as well. So let's get started with the review. The Copper Jackal supplement is set out by Tim M. and James Kearney, Matt Click, and Michael Parker at Absolute Tabletop, and I believe this to be one of the best supplements by far that I've seen that was released by fans of the hobby, and not an official supplement. By official, I mean it's not released and published through the company that produces the game system. And the Copper Jackal supplement is largely based around Dungeons and Dragons 5e. Although it can, with a little bit of adaptation, be used for other systems as well. I thought the cover of a PDF was beautiful, and the colors, the copper, the coin with the jackal and dragon grin on top, I thought was great. The one thing I would have liked to see on the cover, in addition to this copper coin, was possibly a piece of artwork showing what a copper jackal looked like, perhaps holding this coin. But I love the simplistic feel. As far as how they've done it, but that's something I would have liked to see. I very much so appreciate the dedications that they included, and I think it was a smart idea of them to include a lot of the playtesters for the supplement. I I I like the artwork is some of the best I've seen, and the page color is just perfect. I like the concept of how the Copper Jackal started. And that concept is, it's like the Expendables, but with swords and magic. I like this idea. However, I think in the full supplement, we do lose a bit of that, the Expendables feeling. And to me, the Expendables was more of a small group of people, all in kind of a ragtag bunch of misfits who were heroes, and did what they need to do. Whereas in the supplement, when you break down the chapters, the chapter heads, and then however many players play a Copper Jackal, it feels more like a big organization, guild, or military type thing. So you lose some of that small, specialized feel. I like how they begin out with the 11 Grizzly truths of the Copper Jackals and Dragon Grid, and give a bit of lore to the world and some of the locations. And some of the background of the Jackals, the Prime Jackals, the source of Titan Copper. I think all that was done good for a summary. And how the public perceives the Copper Jackals was also interesting to me. The timeline, I like the idea of a timeline. To me, it felt kind of short, like it was only 25 years, and that might be the intentional, or that the Copper Jackals have only been around a short time. But to me, it feels like this should have been part of the world as a whole. And as such, I would have liked to see an expanded timeline. Right. So, I don't know. I think probably the best solution to this and the lore, because I would have loved to see even more lore, would be maybe release another supplement dealing with just those two things and expanding on them, or even some videos. Because for me, it would be interesting to see the backstories of the Prime Jackals, which were the first of the Copper Jackals, and their backstories, and get to know them as people. Same with the chapter heads and other important NPCs within the Copper Jackals. So perhaps Absolute Tabletop will consider that, and and do something with that suggestion. I do like how they broke down on each event within the timeline, but I think there should have been more of a spread of time and possibly more events. I like the hierarchy of the Copper Jackals, of how they're divided into chapters and have a chapter head. I think that works perfectly. I like how the squads, which is a group of jackals who are from the same chapter that undertake a mission together, is done. I also like how when a group of copper jackals from different chapters work together, it's called a task force. I like that distinction. Chapter dues. Copper Jackal chapters are expected to fund themselves and support their members, but it's mandatory that 10% of the chapter's earnings go to the prime jackals. And these go to support the faction as a whole, maintaining secrecy and protection of its leaders. I understand why this is in there. I like the concept of it. However, I've came across this in different forms, whether it's a paladin and character that's expected to give 10% of their earnings to a church or temple, or a rogue who belongs to a guild and has to pay dues. And one of the issues I find with it is players don't like to give up what they earn. Yes, there are benefits to doing so, which players love. Players of the advantages, but unless you have a good group of players, they really don't like paying dues. So, to me, that is one of those things. It's necessary. It's very understandable why it's in there, but at the same time, I would be a bit hesitant to say each player has to pay a due to the chapter. Now, one workaround I've thought of, and some others who did the Google Hangout earlier, is when the Copper Jackals receive the reward upon completing the mission and having the dues already taken out of the reward. I think this is probably the best compromise for this situation. I like how in the supplement they allow for conflicts within the ranks of the Copper Jackals. And I like how they used the intentional use of lethal force upon a Copper Jackal by a comrade is not permitted and considered a violation of the Copper Vow, which every Copper Jackal takes, and that people who violate the Copper Vow are dealt with harshly. This leaves the feeling intact that the Copper Jackals are more than just combat and arms. the Copper Jackals are supposed to consider each other closer than family. They have the same spirit, the same marrow. They're literally to be extensions of each other. I love that feel, especially for a group game, which I do find interesting because I picture this as being very hard to bribe a Copper Jackal to betray another one. Yet that's an option that exists in the incursion tables later on in the supplement. And there are rogue Copper Jackals all as well. So I find this is kind of interesting that it could be both ways. I like how they allow for being able to leave the chapters and the Copper Jackals all together with permission such as your chapter head, blessing of a prime jackal, or the first jackal. This leaves it feeling like once you join for life type of thing, but gives players the freedom to move around into another chapter if they picked one that didn't really fit the character, or as the character develops and changes, it allows them to pick another chapter that fits what they're becoming better. I like that there are no standard uniforms overall for the Copper Jackals other than the Jacobites. I find players like to customize the characters themselves. Also, by allowing the no uniform or very little, such as a certain scabbard or a distinct trinket like a ring or a necklace, is that this fits that freedom of choice very well. I love that the membership is based on merit, so it doesn't matter what the character's past is, the race, the gender, or anything like that. This allows for any class, any background, any race, including monster races, to join, which I love. The progression chart, I think, is fine. There is one change from the playtest that I wish to mention here, and I'll explain some of it later. The change I see immediately is they moved the chapter avatar to 17, and then they put in something at level 20 called Legacy Copper. I think this was smart on the part of Absolute Tabletop, because of one main reason. And most campaigns aims now are geared to end about level 20, or shortly after hitting level 20. So by this change, you get that 3 or 4 levels of being a chapter avatar and doing super tremendously epic stuff. Even though you can do epic stuff before then, this is like the cream aim of the Copper Jackals. So I think it was smart of them to give you a couple levels that you can experience with that benefit. I love how the Copper Jackals are set up as a faction class. And a faction class is something that is added on top of the core rules and other supplements. So all the base mechanics for 5e, and other systems are still in play. That just adds to it. I like how they included copper archetypes, which we'll cover later. But I like that it's a pre-selected set of copper boons that are chosen to work well together. This is very good for one-shots, because it is really easy to make a Copper Jackal character using a pre-archetype. You just say, okay, this is what my guy's about. You choose the archetype to fit your play style, and it gives you the boons and even tells you what order you should take them in for the best results. So I love how they included that. I love the Copper Jackal progression section, which is an overview of different things, such as what level you get mining at what level you get chapter initiation at, chapter renown, chapter avatar, legacy copper. I love that whole section. And one thing I want to mention with the legacy copper that I found interesting and wish they had included a little bit more on is that legacy copper is Titan copper that's extracted from a fallen or retired Copper Jackal. Mechanically, it augments your existing Jackal byte and allows you an addition or use of a single copper boon once per shoulder long rest. I think that's awesome. The thing I would have done something with it is when they first mentioned Titan copper and what it is and the Jackal byte, it's assumed that this Titan copper and Jackal byte becomes a part of you. And they don't really explain in the supplement how it can be removed. So I think something along that line, maybe a couple suggestions or a small table of ways that you could remove Titan copper would give some more feeling to it, but it would also allow DMs to have foes or enemies try to remove Titan copper from Copper Jackals and then turn it against the Avengering group. So I think this is something they could have improved on even with a small paragraph. I love how they do initiations, living quarters, equipment, all that for the mechanics of a chapter. I can't see anything that could be improved on the copper valve. This is I think one of the best well-written valves for an organization or faction I have ever seen. It's simple, it's to the point, right? However, it leaves a lot of room for the GMs and the players to determine what the tenets mean. I also love that every Copper Jackal has to speak this as part of the initiation, and that it only has to be spoken in the presence of at least one other Copper Jackal. And it's short, it's 6 lines, so it's easy to remember or to keep in your notes. And for those who don't have the full supplement, the copper vow states, it's honorable beyond honor, without compromise, courageous beyond circumstance, without compromise, unprejudiced and just, without compromise, loyal unto death and beyond, without compromise. Ours is the unseen kingdom. We are its warrior kings. Sandara caprice, forever without compromise. And Sandara caprice is Titan speak, meaning roughly forever without compromise. I love this. I think it's flexible. I think it makes for awesome situations. I can totally see a Copper Jackal saying something like as he's given himself up as a sacrifice to save other Copper Jackals. I could see him repeating just the line, loyal unto death and beyond, without compromise, as his last breath leaves him. So I thought that was excellently done. And I love how they explain who enforces it, and just some of the different things on how they include a section with the Copper Vow and the Morally Great Award. I like this. It's because some rules there is morally great. For example, in one of my campaigns, one of the major bad people is a dragon lich. This dragon lich is a victim. It started out as a little boy who a woman kidnapped, raised up as her son, and did some arcane experiments on it, and one went horribly wrong, turning it into this dragon lich. So even though it's the head of a necrotic order that are causing havoc and chaos, it's still morally gray. And do you try to rescue the essence of the boy that was, or do you put down what it's become? So I like how they include that section, and I like how they explain the Jacobites and the roll tables. I love this for a quick throw together copper or Jackal for a one shot. I also love the roll tables as inspiration to do my own thing. I can't think of anything to suggest improving on it. I love how they did a physical manifestation of what it looks like designs on it. I will say my favorite design is the ever-changing design according to the bearer's mood. That to me is just awesome to have like an entire copper with a tattoo that ever is always changing what it looks like. And I like that they include where the Jackal bites is located. Okay, we have reached the copper attunement, which I love how this works. It's a walkie-talkie type thing. I love the idea. I think it's tremendously useful for a rogue or a ranger who's scouting ahead. To not have to report back because it extends to 5 miles for jackals that are in the same chapter, 1 mile if they're not. So this lets most of the groups stay back while the scouts do their job. And the scouts can be talking with them without having to walk that back to the group. So I think this helps a lot. I like that you can choose to go dark, which is basically radio silence. I think that was well done and a very smart move to include those. Then the supplement gets into the chapters. There is a couple things I would have done differently with the chapter section. The first thing I would have done with the chapter sections is make a table ahead of the descriptions of the chapters. And include the name of the chapter, the one-line description they gave, and the page number that the chapter starts on. Sort of a miniature table of contents. And that's because the chapter section is 20-some odd pages long, and scrolling through it to find one particular chapter can be a chore. And for me, when I skip a couple pages on my PDF, I have to wait a minute for it to catch up in order to actually see the page I'm on. So I think something like that would have helped, and you could type in the number of the page easily. I also would have liked to see this expanded a little bit. I think they did good with the 10 chapters or so that they did include. I like most of the chapters, but I've seen one of two things happen with my players talking with them about which chapters the characters would belong to. And that's because we're taking pre-existing characters and turning them into copper jackals, instead of having them make the character as a copper jackal from the beginning. And the two things that happen that I've seen is a player will have an idea of his character, the personality, the play style, and it's either a perfect fit to a chapter, or it's none of these chapters really fit me. I guess I have to settle for the one that comes the closest. So perhaps a supplement that is entirely a bunch of chapters, maybe after the submissions of all the homebrew chapters, maybe they can take each of those little supplements and combine them into a bigger one that is solely chapters of the Copper Jackal. That would be something I think would be tremendously beneficial. As far as the format of each chapter, I like how it's set up, where they give the name of the chapter, a one-sentence description, such as alloys of eminence, or masters of every variety of magic, and then they list the types of magic in that setting. And they give a base description of what they believe, how members of that chapter should act, a motto. They tell who the chapter head is, and they give it an initiation and base of operations. I love how all this is set up. My favorite part of the chapter overall is the initiation. This can be tremendous for DMs because you can do flashbacks, showing how the character joined the Copper Jackals, and it can help give more of a real feel to what's going on, such as in the Chick Kickers, where in order to join the Chick Kickers, you have to be hung by the neck until you die, which I think is just awesome. But this leaves players later on who have undertaken that. They have the flashbacks of being strangled. And what happens if they have to attend an execution where someone's being hung, or if they're being strangled? Or how does having gone through that affect the character? So I think that was a very excellent move on Absolute Tabletop's part to include that. I like the chapter renowns and how they progress. It's one thing I find interesting, though, is the chapter renown 1. If you look and read through all the chapters, basically every Copper Jackal has the same thing for chapter renown 1, whereas the others are different. Yes, there are some differences in which skill you gain expertise in, and the fact of the location of your living quarters. is different depending on your chapter. But the renown itself is you gain expertise in one of the following skills, and you get to choose which skill out of the list they provide. I like this, especially with the way I look at expertise is as a DM. And I like the living quarters angle, so the Copper Jackal always has somewhere to call home. I just think that individual chapters could have added something to make it a bit more unique to their chapter. One of the things we discussed in the Google Hangouts that I thought would have been a smart move was applying the boons to a chapter. And given in the chapter section a suggestion of which boons fit the kind of people that would belong to the chapter. One of the drawbacks we talked about was with so many chapters, it took away from the expendable feel. That small ragtag group, a rebel hero feel. And made it feel more like a large military type organization. Which I like how it feels, but I also like the idea of it being a small ragtag rebel group. I will say my favorite two chapters that are included in it is Onslaught and the Night Huntsman. And that's for me. Personally, I like the idea of being this tougher than tough war veteran. And I like the Night Huntsmen, which are the monster slayers. Those, to me, in every MMO and RPG I've played, those are my preferred personality and classes. It's stuff that follows along those lines. And everyone has their own personal preference. I do find it's pretty interesting in the chapters that they have pretty much every possible type class and kind of goals. You have politicians, you have bounty hunters, you have warriors, spy masters, assassins, etc. I thought they did a really good job with that. Although I found like some of my players, a character doesn't always fit quite seamlessly into a specific chapter. I thought for the Copper Boons explanation, they did okay. I liked the manifestation roll table, but I would have done a couple things differently. For one, I would have explained when the manifestations hit, Is it that each time a copper boon is used, is it the only the first time the copper boon is used? They kind of left that open, and put the way I kind of rule it is it's the first time that each copper boon is used. You experience wherever you roll all or choose off of the roll table for the manifestation. And then after that, you don't have an effect for the boons, as far as a bad or negative effect. And I love the effects they used, especially the near-death or spiritual experience for rolling a 10 on a D10. To me, that opens a ton of options for DMs to do flashbacks, visions, dreams, which are some of my favorite things to do, or to give players and characters information. I like how each of the copper boons are divided into different categories, such as assault, defense, support, subterfuge, etc. I think this was a smart move, because as players can say, okay, I'm a paladin, and my paladin's about defending people, so I should look on the defense table first, then maybe assault or support to see what boons I want. The thing I think they could have improved on with this is, again, a miniature table of contents, and it's where they actually list out the page number that each of these categories start at. And they wouldn't even have to do a table of contents. And it's a minor edit if they just, if in parentheses after the name of the category they said something like starting page 85, for example. Oh, that would be sufficient. Some of the copper boons are really good. Some of them are confusing. I think for the most part they did pretty good. One change, or a couple changes I would make to the format of the table is I would move the name of the copper boon to be in first, and I would move the feature type somewhere on the other side of the mechanics. And that's simply because of how we read. For me, it's a bit confusing to see what you want to do, then go to the name of what you want to do. And then the full description to me just feels more natural at the end of a row or a table. So that's the change I would make in the format. There is one particular thing I want to discuss with Copper Boom, because I've had a lot of players ask me how this works. And I've had to do some rulings on how I see it working. And it is under imminence. The boon is called imminence infant. What it's set up to do is make a level 1 spell or a cantrip. Under the I want to section. Now, the problem I see with this is two things. It's the first part, I think they hit the cantrip on the turn on target. And that's where you commit it to memory. It's always prepared. Doesn't count against your total number of spells, no. And you can cast it without using a spell slot or need for material components. In that way, I can see it being a cantrip. The area of it becomes an issue, and where people have asked me about is according to the code books, a cantrip is at will. So they can use it as many times as they want. Yet in this boon, it specifies it's cast once per long rest. So and the question is, by including that, it defeats the purpose of it being a cantrip. In the fact of it's not at will. There's a limit to it. So, I'm kind of turned into I might have changed the make a level 1 spell a cantrip under the I want to make a level 1 spell work as a cantrip. And I know it's kind of nitpicking, but I've had so many players bring this up and ask me, and then I as a DM have to say, okay, well, this is how we're going to use it. So that's something they could fix or improve upon. And there are a couple other boons that are a little confusing as well. And there's one, I believe it's under support. I want to touch on that because we talked about this in the Google Hangouts, and it brings up a pretty good point on the copper boons. So let me scroll down and find it. Support. Copper bullring, copper condition. Okay, here it is. Copper Guardian. This is what anyone adjacent to you gains +1 to the AC. Anyone within 15 feet of you gains your Constitution modifier worth of temporary hit points, and anyone within 30 feet of you gains advantage on concentration checks. These effects are cumulative. This is tremendous, especially if more than one person in the group takes this and they fight close to you. The thing I see with this is two things. First, it doesn't say when it happens for stuff like temporary hit points. Is it all the time once you've used the bonus? Is it at the start of an encounter? If people have these bonuses, is it every round in an encounter? And that can make a big difference. It's, for example, say you have two people in the group who take this. You get +2 to your AC. And say both of them have a constitution modifier of 3. So, they get, anyone within 15 feet of you gains 6 temporary hit points by its stacking. Now, part of that is it allies? Because it says anyone. That could mean enemies also. Or foes, NPCs, etc. Or is it only copper jackals or allies? I believe the intent is anyone in the adventuring group. Then you get into, is that 6 temporary hit points once per encounter? Is it the start of every round? Is it going all the time? So, or like you only have to be out of combat for 1 round to gain those 6 hit points? So some explanation on those kind of things would have been nice to have, because I can see that it would be confusing. And part of it, I believe, is intentional by the members of Absolute Tabletop to leave that freedom open to the DMs and GMs who use this supplement to decide how it works. So it may not be something that was overlooked in the supplement and when they were creating it. But if it was, or something they didn't think of, perhaps they can do a video or something explaining how they see things like that. Things. So us who use it as DMs and players can understand, okay, this is how the creators of the supplement picture this working. And therefore we should try to hold true to that. Even though I personally take what I like out of supplements and ignore what I don't like. And I do that even with core works, because it's all about having fun. I love the weapon customization abilities as boons. I think that was a very smart move. There is not a wide range of things that allow you to customize a normal longsword and give it that special feel. Out there, I've seen a few, including Michael Booker's Be a Better Weapon Master, which at some point I'll be reviewing that as well. among other supplements. But I think it was very smart of them to include a section on that as a boom. I love the archetypes. One suggestion I would do with an archetype is back with the chapters. I would go through and put in the description of the chapters 1 to 3 archetypes that really encompass what that chapter's about. For like Night Huntsman, for example, I could see them being a bowman, a brawler, etc. Onslaught, I could see Onslaught being a copper commander who leads others. I could see them being an executioner, etc. So I think that is something that they could have done that would have gave it a little bit more oomph to the chapter descriptions and made it easier, because once people pick the chapter, they could say, okay, these archetypes kind of fit in with what we're doing as a chapter. I love the adversary, traders, and rivals section. I think it was very well done. Although I would have done one change, and we talked about this in the Google Hangout. In the incursion table, there is something called a terminal, which is a repository of knowledge that is considered an enemy. And we got into a long discussion earlier about how would you fight against such a place or such a thing. I would have included a section of this on the adversary page, or included it in the amalgams, and made the amalgams and the term halt one option on the incursion table instead of 2. Or simply, to me, it is on the adversary, trader, and rival page, instead of just in the incursion table. And I would love to see a video by someone at Absolute Tabletop explaining how they would use a term art in a session and having it kind of as an enemy that the players have to overcome. The only way I pictured this working as an actual enemy is if the term heart is sentient and can control what's within it. So that's something I thought could be included and changed around. I personally don't like the XP table. And for me, that comes from 2 different things. The first one of it is I don't give XP in campaigns. I level up by milestone. And I know this is a suggested method of building encounters, and it's good for new DMs or DMs who aren't real experienced with encounter building. So I'm glad to see they included it. But for me personally, I would have taken it out, or I would have done a small table with the level or a listing of the difficulties of each, such as easy, medium, hard, deadly, and copper, and then underneath it write CR ratings. For me, CR ratings is where I judge to set up a combat encounter, such as if I have a group of 4 level 5 player characters. For me, usually a decently hard fight, so I would say medium to hard quality is 2 CR5 creatures and maybe 3 CR2. But these are copper jackals. They're supposed to be fighting against overwhelming odds. So one of the things that we talked about in Google Hangouts earlier was bringing back the minions out of 4.0. That looked just like a full character, except for they only have 1 hit point. They did as much damage to a player character as a normal monster, but you could throw in herds of them because they only have 1 hit point. 1 hit, they're dead. I like this idea. I think it helps put the feel of the copper jackals being against overwhelming odds, and gives kind of that movie epic battle feel, such as in Lord of the Rings, where the Orcus is cutting down orcs left and right, or the Avengers. And I like that kind of feeling to my combats. Level, character level. I like the idea of the mining at level 3 and initiation at level 4. However, I would also include something as a DM that players don't need to know about. They might know about it, but they might not. And that would be having a particular chapter or kind of watching these adventurers who want to become copper jackals at a level before level 3. Or even using the NPCs that give them a task as maybe those NPCs are copper jackals without the players or characters knowing about it. To me, that gives it a bit more leniency, especially for players who are new to role-playing, who want to start at level 1, but they want to try to be a copper jackal. So that's how I would have worked to that. But that might be just as a personal preference. The incursion table is just amazing. It blows my mind how good this is. I can literally take this and roll up an entire session for a one-shot or a session of a campaign within 10 minutes. It's this and the IARR method of prepping puts my prep work for a session down from 4 to 5 hours to literally within 20 minutes I can have something up and ready, which is awesome for us extremely busy DMs, or for those whose life just got so busy that they didn't really have time to prep. Now, I can't think of anything really negative about this. One change I personally would have made is taking out all the D4 rolls. That's a personal preference. I don't like rolling a D4, so I would have included 2 more options on each to make it a D6 roll. That, again, is a personal preference of mine. Not every player or DM's gonna mind that, but I find a lot of players don't like using the D4. Now, this is one of my favorite parts of the incursion table, and that's the threat. And I've done this different ways. I've had roll the D4 for the threat, and then determine what the threat is from there, such as a natural disaster with an earthquake. My favorite way, though, is not to roll the D4, but to have them roll one of each of the other categories. So, such as a single mighty foe, an enemy faction arrival, herds of enemies, and a natural disaster. By doing this, we come up with something that even is more awesome. So, I'm gonna just give an example. A single mighty foe. This is your big bad boss. Say it's a lich. It belongs to the enemy faction and of the Harbingers. So it's a Harbinger lich, which is amazing in itself. But it is in command and of iron skin orcs. So there's a herd of orcs, and you can determine as DM how many there are. Now, not only do they have to fight this herd of orcs and this orange lich, but there's a natural disaster going on at the same time, such as an earthquake. To me, this is just totally epic using it in this fashion instead of one of these things. I love the action starters. I think those are perfectly fine. Tension builders. I would have done maybe a 2-sentence thing before the table saying how often to use a tension builder. So far, I've been using it just at the beginning of the session, and saying the whole session is a Copper Jackal session. We talked this over in the Google Hangouts earlier, and we thought that 3 times per session was good. And those 3 times would be at the beginning, when you're first setting the scene of what's going on. In the middle, usually right before your bathroom break or to get a drink, to kind of leave that, oh well, this is going on, and we'll be back after these messages, kind of deal. And then once at the end, like right before the final encounter of the session, whether that's a big bad boss or a situation that resolves the mission they're on. And I love how these work, and I think using it those 3 times is perfect for one session. But I would have liked to see Absolute Tabletop include a couple sentences there about when to use it. I love the quick start pre-generated incursions. There's something like 20 of them. I can run entire sessions without prepping nothing but a monster stat, which I think is totally awesome. So that's my review of the Attribute supplement. Overall, I think it is by far the best supplement I've had a chance to review, and I have over 200 PDFs and supplements. It's on my computer. Some of them I haven't had the chance to look at yet. I think the artwork is amazing, and I think it's a beautiful supplement, something I would love to have in hard copy for my shelf at some point. And I think that some minor changes is they could have made it even more amazing than it already is. The reason I suggest in several spots during the review another supplement or a video is because this supplement's already 140 pages, which is by far the biggest supplement I have that I've actually looked at. And if they were to add everything I personally would have liked to see, it would have been 300 to 500 pages. And probably taken 2 to 4 years to put out. So I'm pretty satisfied overall with what they did, especially when you consider the price. It's under $10 on AbsoluteTabletop.com. That is amazing because you can, with just a basic knowledge of a system's mechanics, you can run sessions for the rest of your life off of this one supplement. That is saying a lot. For $10, you can entertain yourself numerous and endless hours on end. So with that is my review, and I will sign off saying may the dice always roll in your